a highly fictionalized version of the American Civil War's campaign, Garrison's Raid, which occurred from April 17th to May 2nd, 1863. The raiders consisted of about 1,700 U.S. cavalry troops. The raid traveled and fought from Tennessee through Mississippi, ending in the Union-held Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The raid was a significant factor in the fall of Vicksburg, Mississippi in July 1863. Directed by John Ford, the story is military in nature, but the real struggle is between the mission-oriented commander, played by John Wayne, and a doctor more concerned with life-saving, played by William Holden. Introduction. Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors and let you know that there will be spoilers ahead. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on The Horse Soldiers 1959. This movie is rated 7.1 on IMDb.com. The film fares slightly better on RottenTomatoes.com with 81% on the tomato meter and 75% audience approval. This film was criticized after and since its release. It was also a financial failure. Despite this, the movie is beautifully shot, often on location, and it remains a favorite for fans of director John Ford and actors John Wayne and William Holden. By any measure, this film had an all-star cast backing up the principals. Actors. The single-minded Union commander, Colonel John Marlowe, was played by John Wayne. True to form, Wayne was too old and fat to be a Civil War cavalry officer at 52 years old. Garrison was around 37 at the time of the raid. The great Western actor Wayne was first covered early on in Chisholm 1970. William Holden was outstanding as Dr. Major Henry Kendall. Holden was covered in Stalag 17, 1953, one of my all-time favorites. Willis Boucher had a prominent role as Colonel Phil Secord, a glory-seeking politician in military uniform. Boucher was first covered in The Violent Men 1955. Great film if you haven't seen it. The regular John Wayne gang consisted of Ken Curtis, aka Gunsmoke's Festus, as Corporal Wilkie, who was first covered in The Alamo 1960. Bing Russell as Dunker from Billy the Kid vs. Dracula 1966. Hank Warden as Deacon Clump, also from The Alamo 1960, where he also played a reverend. And William Wellman Jr., son of the great director, who was uncredited as the bugler from The Born Losers 1967. The great unheralded actor Strother Martin played the role of a Confederate deserter named Virgil. Martin was first covered way back in McClintock 1963. Denver Pyle played another deserter, Jackie Joe. Pyle was also first covered in The Alamo 1960. At Newton Station, Mississippi, the local Confederate commander is Colonel Miles, played by Carlton Young. Young was first covered in the great film The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance 1962. More senior actor, Basil Ruesdale, covered in Blackboard Jungle 1955, played the Reverend Commandant of a boys' military academy that was required to send his young men into combat based on the Battle of New Market. The academy scenes were filmed at the historic Jefferson College in Natchez, Mississippi. It's an excellent place to visit if you are in the area. I've done a lot of archaeology up there, especially at Fort Rosalie. Constance Towers played fierce Southerner Hannah Hunter. Tower was born in Montana in 1933. As a child, Towers appeared on the radio and later had plans to be an opera singer. When her family moved to New York, she began studying at the Juilliard School of Music and later at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Eventually, she was led from opera to stage work. Several movie roles came her way, such as playing a school teacher in the musical Bring Your Smile Along 1955, a sappy Southerner in The Horse Soldiers 1959, Sergeant Rutledge 1960 with Jeffrey Hunter and Woody Strode. She played a stripper in Shock Corridor 1963, and finally a reformed prostitute in The Naked Kiss 1964. She made her Broadway debut in 1965 and was indeed a star in this medium. She also later became very successful on television, including soap operas. More recent movies include The Next Karate Kid 1994, The Relic 1997, and A Perfect Murder 1998. Althea Gibson played Lukey, the slave attendant to Hannah Hunter, Constance Towers. Gibson had a small part, but she has a pretty fantastic life story. Gibson was born in 1927 in South Carolina. She grew up in Harlem and at age 15 won the New York City Black Tennis Championship. This got her a sports scholarship to Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, FAMU in Tallahassee, Rattlers Strike. In 1950, Gibson was the first African American to play in the U.S. Tennis Championships. In 1951, she became the first African American to play at Wimbledon. She was victorious in the French Open in 1956, Wimbledon in 1957 and 1958, and the U.S. Championship in 1957 and 1958. After retiring from tennis in 1958, Gibson traveled with the Harlem Globetrotters, putting on exhibitions. In 1964, she became the first African American to play in the LPGA. Gibson tried singing and acting, and this movie is part of that attempt. In The Horse Soldiers 1959, Gibson got the contrarian director to change some of her dialogue from stereotypical black speech. She was unable to create a successful film career. Gibson retired from golf in 1977 and spent almost 2 decades working in New Jersey sports. She died in poverty in 2003 at the age of 76. Legendary cowboy star Hoot Gibson played the role of Sergeant Brown. It is said that he appeared in this film as a favor to his old friend John Ford. Edmund Richard Gibson, later known as Hoot, was born in 1892 in Nebraska. Hoot grew up in Wyoming, Colorado, and California, and he was a real cowboy. At 13, the young Toby Tyler ran away and worked in a circus. He began rodeoing in 1907 and joined a Wild West company for 4 years. In 1910, Hoot began performing stunts in movies. After the principal director he was working with was murdered, he began doing stunt work for D.W. Griffith. While working as a stuntman and bit actor, he kept rodeo riding and won national and international championships. By the late teens, Hoot was working with Harry Carey and director John Ford for films like Cheyenne's Pal 1917, Straight Shooting 1917, The Secret Man 1917, and A Marked Man 1917. When World War I broke out, Hoot joined the Army, rising to sergeant in the Tank Corps, just like Elvis did later. In 1919, he was discharged and went back to the movies. Hoot slowly became more popular, and the Ford-directed Action 1921 made him a star. Amazingly, Hoot was making almost $15,000 a week in 1925. He made the transition to talkies with no problems. Hoot's movies made the transition to race car driving and flying cowboys. Still, he was eventually done in by singing cowboys such as Gene Autry and Roy Rogers. Hoot toured with the circus in 1938 and 39 before returning to movies in 1943. His last big film was Trigger Law 1944. Hoot did some television work and cameos in movies like The Horse Soldier 1959, Ocean's 11 1960, which I've reviewed and you can check it out. In 1960, he was diagnosed with cancer and was out of money. He took any work he could find, including casino greeter and carnival appearances. He died in 1962 at the age of 70. Cheers. Story. This movie begins with lines of Union cavalry slowly riding along a levee and singing a song about home. This is classic John Ford directing, as he loved to show long lines of men set against a vast expanse. I was never sure if this made man larger, towering over the landscape, or smaller when compared to the landscape. Union Colonel John Marlowe is taken by his commanding general on board a ship where he meets Generals Grant and Sherman. The implication is that the raid will help Grant take Vicksburg as it did historically. The plan is to head from LaGrange, Tennessee to attack the Newton Depot, now known as Newton, Mississippi. Marlowe and his men will destroy anything they can on the way down related to railroading or the ability to wage war. This is very similar to the actual raid shown in The General 1926 and The Great Locomotive Chase 1956, both of which I have reviewed. Grant warns Marlowe not to get caught, or he will spend the rest of the war in Andersonville Prison located in Georgia. I've done a bunch of archaeology there too. Back in LaGrange, the Union cavalry is getting ready to leave. The men have been led to believe they're going to Nashville for a parade. Colonel Secord, Willis Boucher, announces he is going into politics following the successful raid. Corporal Wilkie, Ken Curtis, Sergeant Dunker, Bing Russell, and another man are sitting around swapping rumors. A favorite pastime of soldiers since the dawn of civilization. A white coat wearing doctor, Major Henry Kendall, William Holden, arrives and reports that he has been assigned to the raid. Trying to be snotty, Marlowe says Kendall is out of uniform. When he discovers he is the doctor, he pitches a fit to the commanding general. The general says the doctor goes along. Marlowe takes Kendall for a talk. Kendall is shocked that Marlowe plans to leave his wounded behind. Kendall is assigned to check the men for fitness, and he stands up to Marlowe. Kendall removes the veteran Sergeant Major Jack Pinnock from duty. Kendall's assistant is Hoppy Hopkins, O.Z. Whitehead. Marlowe sends his men to capture another Sergeant Major, and they capture Sergeant Major Kirby, Judson Pratt, forcing him to go on the raid. The troops ride out, and it's not long before they realize they are heading south. Soon after they enter the Southern Territory and send out scouts, they come under attack from some Confederate dismounted cavalry. 2 Union soldiers are wounded, and Kendall gives aid. One of them later dies. Kendall is called to a slave cabin where a woman is giving birth. When Marlowe finds out, he places the doctor under officer's arrest and orders him to work only on soldiers. Since the Union force was discovered, Marlowe sends about 1/3 of his troops back. At sundown, they arrive at a plantation, which I believe is Oakland Plantation, a part of Cane River Creole National Historical Park. In the movie, 2 ladies are in the house. White owner, Hannah Hunter, Constance Towers, and devoted slave, Lukey, Althea Gibson. Marlowe kicks his way in and gets snotty. Hannah Hunter comes down and plays the Southern Belle, dripping with juleps and honey. I do declare I had never seen nobody like you before. Marlowe says his men will be sleeping on the property that night and she is under house arrest. Hannah curses the Yankees as soon as they are out of sight. She returns acting as a Southern Belle and charms Secord. She invites the officers to dinner. Kendall declines because he is under arrest. However, he does eventually end up at the dinner. That night at dinner, they are well fed and provided for. Hannah bells it up and does a chicken breast versus a human breast showing. Marlowe says that he will use the room for a meeting, but she leads him to a smoking room. Kendall is sent upstairs to guard Hannah as she goes upstairs. Marlowe and the other officers go over the plan. Lukey goes in with Hannah, and when Kendall opens the firebox, he learns that he can hear the men talking in the room below. Marlowe tells them they will head across the Southern Territory to Baton Rouge after the attack on Newton Station. Kendall opens the door and he sees Lukey and Hannah listening at the other fire pipe. Downstairs, Kendall grabs the 2 ladies, throws them into the meeting room, and tells the officers that the ladies were listening. After being caught, Hannah goes full Confederate. Marlowe forces Hannah and Lukey to travel with the cavalry to protect their movements. On the march, Hannah makes a break but is quickly run down after she falls in the water. She is forced to watch Union soldiers dry her underwear while she sits in a blanket. The scouts soon return and say an enemy scouting patrol is on the other side of the river. The Union cavalry hides in the trees to let the enemy pass by. Hannah tries to warn them, but Marlowe chokes her out. On Kendall's advice, Marlowe dumps a hat full of water on her. 2 sergeants are demoted for letting her escape. Hannah slaps Marlowe for not allowing her privacy. A scouting party, including Deacon Clump, Hank Warden, is fired upon from a barn. The men in the barn quickly surrender. The 2 Confederates are deserters Virgil, Strother Martin, and Jackie Joe, Denver Pyle. They are holding the local sheriff, Russell Simpson, as a prisoner. Hannah rides in and thinks Marlowe is mistreating the sheriff. Marlowe gives the deserters first aid and then new cigars. The 2 deserters give all of the info on their old unit. Marlowe then puts on a glove and knocks out the 2 deserters. They then tie them up and give them to the sheriff. Marlowe has told the sheriff that they are heading to Vicksburg. The Union cavalry make it to Newton Station and receive a rather cold reception from the ladies. There are wounded Confederates waiting in the town. The local Confederate commander is the wounded Colonel Miles Carlton Young. Kendall knows Miles from the old days fighting out west. Kendall says Miles is a West Point graduate and can't believe he gave up without a fight. Just then they get news that a rebel train is coming in fast. The Union forces quickly form a defensive barricade on the road between the buildings. The Confederates on the train jump off and charge straight into the barricade, where they are shot down like dogs. When most of the Confederates are dead, the now wounded Colonel Miles comes back down the street holding the battle flag. Kendall tackles him to save his life. Kendall and a Confederate doctor tend to the wounded. Hannah helps for a while, but like Scarlett O'Hara, she has to leave the hospital. Lukey leads the African Americans in making bandages. The Union troops get busy tearing up the railroad and making Sherman bow ties, a name given to twisted railroad ties in the South. These bow ties are made by heating up a section of railroad track and wrapping it around a tree or a telephone pole. In the real war, there was no real battle of Newton Depot. The Union forces took it and burned some stuff up with little resistance. Marlowe sits with a young man as he dies. Finally, Colonel Miles makes it to the operating table. Outside of the hospital, Marlowe drinks and rages on everyone. Hannah studies him before she breaks down. Marlowe explains that he hates doctors because they killed his true love in an operation. As Kendall prepares to leave, he has a peaceful moment with his friend Colonel Miles. Miles says that Confederate General Bedford Forrest is after them and they will soon be in Andersonville prison. Forrest was actually the pursuer of another Union raid in Alabama named Straight's Raid. Hoppy decides to stay with the wounded prisoners. The Union cavalry heads towards Baton Rouge, leaving Newton Station a burning mess. The townspeople send word that the Union forces are moving southwest towards Baton Rouge. Colonel Secord is spreading sedition against his commander. Dunker has blood poisoning, and Kendall uses green moss to treat it. Marlowe is disgusted. Later, the troops pass an African-American church and are fired on by a Confederate militia. Lukey is shot, and Kendall begins to treat her. Before he can start, she dies. All the Union men, including Sergeant Brown, Hoot Gibson, and Marlowe, are kind to Hannah. In the morning, Kendall finds that Dunker has removed the poultice because it itched. Kendall takes him in for surgery. The troops bed down for the night, and Kendall has to remove the leg of Dunker. They plan on hitting a salt factory in the morning. The Confederate commander of an artillery battery says he needs the aids of the cadets from the Jefferson Military Academy. This is based on the Battle of New Market, where on May 15, 1864, cadets from the Virginia Military Academy, some as young as 15, fought gallantly. In the movie The Commandant, Basil Ruesdale says his oldest boy is only 16, but he agrees to help. The 16-year-old student commander orders his boys up. At dawn, they move out to join the artillery battery. The commandant leads the boys, except two that have mumps, forward with only a Bible and a cane. As he passes a house, a woman comes down and begs that her son, one of the drummers, be excused because his father, his uncles, and his brother have all been killed in the war. The commandant releases the boy, and the mother drags the fighting child into the house. In the morning, Kendall tells Marlowe that he has lost Dunker during the operation. Marlowe jumps on his ass, and Kendall demands a fight.
If, maybe, perhaps. What's the matter, medicine man?
That's no section hand. I've had you. Strip your blouse.
Meanwhile, the little drummer boy escapes from his mother's house. Marlowe and Kendall head into the woods to fight it out. Their one-punch, John Wayne-style fight is cut short when the Confederate artillery battery opens up on the camp troops.
The rule's gonna be, Colonel.
Just make up your own. Oh.
As an aside, I have a theory that many people who grew up watching John Wayne in movies have lost bar fights after throwing a single punch and then wondering why the opponent didn't fall down like in the movies. I'd love to hear your comments. The Union men see the military academy boys crossing the field in a linear formation. Marlowe stops the Union men from firing, but the boys fire a couple of volleys. The troops mount and get ready to run. The drummer boy is caught by Wilkie, and Marlowe says spank him before you let him go. The boys charge with bayonets as the Union cavalry flees. Later, the scouts come in and report that the road is blocked by Confederate regulars and that cavalry is closing in on them from behind. Deacon says he knows a way through the swamps because he used to work on the Underground Railroad smuggling escaped slaves north. Quickly, the Confederate cavalry finds the Union trail in the swamp. Marlowe keeps his weakened force moving forward. Finally, the Union forces make it to a bridge over the river. Marlowe tells Hannah that they are leaving her behind to be picked up by the Confederate forces. About this time, they start receiving fire from the other side of the river that they want to go to. Marlowe is hit in the foot by the fire. He is forced to go under the knife of Kendall. Hannah tends to Marlowe as he looks at her like he is in love. He orders his men to find a way across the river and orders Secord to fight, not surrender. Kendall takes the bullet out of Marlowe's leg and fixes the wound. Marlowe goes to fight, and Kendall gets ready to treat the wounded. The scouts find a place to cross. Marlowe leads a charge across the bridge into the throat of the enemy. The attack overpowers the Confederates, but the Union troops pay a considerable price. With the bridge in their hands, the Union forces place dynamite on the bridge. Kendall decides to stay with the wounded even though he will end up in a POW camp. Marlowe tells Hannah he is in love with her, and they have a sad moment as the rebel cavalry closes in. As Hannah watches, Marlowe lights a fuse and gallops across the bridge ahead of the explosion. The Confederates come in and they have a surgeon, so Kendall could have left. He takes Hannah back to the hospital. Conclusion. This movie is based on an actual Union raid during the Civil War. General Grant had been trying for almost a year to capture Vicksburg and thus control the Mississippi River. In the spring of 1863, Colonel Benjamin H. Gearson led about 1,700 cavalry troopers in a raid on Newton Station. They tore up a lot of railroad and burned supplies, but there was minimal fighting. Dr. Erastus Dean Ewell, the Union surgeon whom William Holden's Major Kendall was based, volunteered to stay behind and was taken prisoner by the Confederates. These events took place before the deadly Andersonville prisoner of war camp was built. The famous Confederate cavalry commander Nathan Bedford Forrest was in Alabama chasing another Union raid, leaving North Mississippi reasonably open. There was no battle with the boys' school, and Gearson and his men made it to Union-held Baton Rouge, Louisiana. These raids had the effect of drawing resources away from the defense of Vicksburg, defended by Confederate General Pemberton. Grant was able to take Vicksburg on July 4, 1863. The town did not celebrate the nation's birthday for over 100 years afterwards. Notoriously mean to actors in the best of times, Ford was at a new level because he had been ordered by his doctor to stop drinking. Ford demanded that Wayne also refrain from drinking during the filming. The producer, Martin Rakin, sent Wayne and Holden to New Orleans, ostensibly to have their teeth cleaned. The actors spent the night drinking. World-famous short summary: Hannah Capulet and Marlowe Montague fall madly in love. Beware the Moors. The boxes are going to pop up. There's another Civil War movie review and a playlist for military movies.